I'm going to once again do a quick round of introduction for our first panel, though they don't need any introduction anymore, but still. Very glad to have Ms. Vasudha Gupta, Director General, NSD News and All India Radio. Ms. Gupta brings with her more than 30 years of experience. She has worked in various capacities, especially with the government verticals, and 32 years and counting. And she has also been, she's smiling out there, Director General Media with Ministry of Home Affairs. And ladies and gentlemen, it's worth noting here that this was at the peak of pandemic. So she was at the helm of affairs, and she's also been with the various agencies, particularly disaster management, etc., ma'am, right? And let me also have a pleasure to welcome Ms.Vedika Sud, CNN Delhi correspondent, 15 years plus experience, and Vedika brings to the table vast experience in anchoring and in reportage, and she's worked with various national news networks as well, and we've, I think, crossed paths in some reporting assignments and as TV anchors as well. Thank you so much, Vedika, and it's such a pleasure to have you here in this capacity. And very, very glad to have with us Mr. Indra Singh. He is ABO News Group Chair and Manager of News and Sports FPC Fiji. 22 years and counting, and vast experience which covers national, international politics, and particularly sports as well, and everything that comes with the broadcast journalism. Thank you so much, Indra, for joining us. And extremely honored to have just right on my right side, Ms. Regina Reyes. She's Senior Vice President and Head of Integrated News and Current Affairs at ABS-CBN in the Philippines, 31 years plus. And by the way, I've been told that one of her shows is the best running shows, TV Patrol in Philippines, Manila. Well, that's the chart topper. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to... Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the role of media during the times of crisis and change. I'm going to start with Ms. Gupta. Especially, ma'am, because we spoke about the pandemic, we're going to talk about the current scenario as far as Russia, Ukraine, Sri Lanka, etc. is concerned. But before that, the Indian broadcasters in various capacities, what they bring to the table, since we are talking about crisis, and at the peak of crisis, you were managing the whole media template, if I may put it that way. Two aspects to it: containing and fighting the misinformation campaign, and most importantly, considering the diversity and the population and the size. And we knew that we are dealing with unknown, handling the dissemination of information. Your opening remarks.
Thank you. And thank you to all my colleague panelists here. As she has asked a very specific question, I will start with this, that the credit of really handling this pandemic so well actually goes to everyone in the country. And I will start with a very simple thing which has been done, that is all-inclusive approach. So as she mentioned, and I also feel, that, like, you know, the MHA was the nodal point at that point of time, because nobody knew what kind of an emergency it is, what kind of disaster it is. And in Indian context, actually, why I'm saying like this, it has been actually handled under the NDMA Act, which is the National Disaster Management Act. And why I'm saying all these things, because when I say all-inclusive approach, all of us know at the time of any kind of disaster, everything is like, you know, everything is just moving away from various things. So here in this particular case, MHA was the nodal, and anything and everything, everybody started just joining. So that anything and everything happening across the country was, at least at one point, we had all kinds of feedbacks, we had all kinds of information reaching in real time. And at this forum, I have absolutely no second thought of acknowledging our public broadcaster, that is Prasar Bharati, because across the country, we have our correspondents, and they were just put in touch with the control room at the MHA. So in the real time, whatever was happening, we knew. And as Priya also mentioned, given the network and given the law and order machinery also, as I said, all-inclusive approach. So whatever was required was done at that point of time by that local resources and the government. And so that is why the things started, always were in control to that extent. So the epidemic was there, no question to that. But then the handling, just because an all-inclusive approach was adopted, and when I am saying all-inclusive approach, it is not that it is we, the public broadcaster. It was across all the media platforms. Some of our friends from the Indian media are here. They can really vouch for it, that anything and everything was reaching to them exactly in a, what should I say, real time frame. And any question they wanted to ask, we were always available to them. And from this, I take you to the other thing she has asked, the fake news or the misinformation. And here I would just say two small points, that the fake news has been, at least we have handled so far, one on the factual clarity, and second on like the interpretation. So factual is normally not really intentional. It may be miscommunication, it may be reading things in a wrong way. But when the misinformation is based on the misinterpretation, then that's a absolutely different kind of a thing, and it then moves to the other formats, rumors and all this. And before I will just close this particular topic here, I must say that the social media at that point of time, the way in India, from the government platforms, from the other media houses platforms, the way we could use was tremendous. I will just give you one small example, that when there was lock and unlock kind of a system India had adopted to contain the pandemic, then the movement of the supplies, the essentials, they were also controlled and regulated. But whatever Ministry of Home Affairs was issuing, we were putting it on Twitter. And I have the instances where the truck drivers were going and showing that this has been now allowed and we must reach in time. This is the, what should I say, the effectiveness, the beauty of the system and the public broadcaster, or say the public system. It was going from our handle, the MHA spokesperson handle, so nobody had any issue about the authenticity in accepting and in showing. So, like, you know, when we say it is the faith, it is the trust that we have to make. And like, you know, there are numerous kind of such things. Once you develop that trust, everything moves automatically. So as we will get into the discussion further, I think there may be more experience sharing if required. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. Since you spoke about social media, and that brings me to Regina sitting on my right. And before I throw that point on you, let me also inform our distinguished audience here that she has been named the 2022 Southeast Asia Laureate for Women in News Editorial by the Association of News Publishers. And by the way, if you may allow, your citation I have with me, it says the award is for your exemplary contribution to your newsroom and under your leadership, your organization's contribution to the society. Since we come from the same place, Regina, newsroom, but then it's an honor to have you on my right. Thank you so much. Now, social media. At the time of crisis, Regina, you have this whole plethora of social media channels. You have Facebook, Insta, etc., Twitter, then the WhatsApp groups, we call it here WhatsApp journalism. You know, all that. Huge challenge.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
We all know how social media disrupted our industry and have become a big part of our lives, especially young people. But in times of crisis and major change in society, I believe that journalists, the news media, that role is essential. That important role still belongs to us. It cannot change. That's always a constant. And that is why whenever there's a crisis or disaster, calamity, anywhere in the world, the journalists are at the center of them, right? We are fearless. We devote resources, unspeakable amounts of money and resources to deploy our people to danger zones, to calamity areas, to anywhere there's an upheaval or big change, because it's our job. And that is the kind of service journalism that no amount of social media, vlogs, or posts can match.
Is that a huge challenge to counter the kind of information that comes in and the way, the speed with which that information is?
Definitely,
Yeah.
because everybody now is a journalist, so to speak, right? Anyone can post anything, can take pictures, can take videos, and post them on social media of, say, fires or typhoons, etc., etc. But what differentiates the professional journalist in all of this is our duty, our mission, our responsibility to inform and educate our public. And therefore, it is not enough for us to just report facts on these things. We also need to devote resources to research, to make sure that we support our journalists in terms of background information, giving them enough latitude to go to places, talk to people, talk to communities, and present the true picture of what they are going through. It's not enough that you post a photo, say, or just say something, a vlog that talks about the event as they happen. Event reporting is not enough, and that is, to me, the value, the real essential role of journalists in society, anywhere in the world.
You know, that point that you raised, that event reporting is not enough, and I think, Vedika, I would want you to pick from there, because you've done event reporting and non-event reporting. I mean the discussions, studio-based discussions, and you've been on the ground as well. At the time of crisis, just to put this in perspective, since you've worked with the Indian channels as well, and now you're heading the India operations for a top-notch international channel like CNN, if you could just share some insights, not really comparing the two templates, but insights, what is it that differentiates us with them? On the crisis front, crisis reportage.
Sure. So I was with the domestic media here in India for over a decade, and of course there's so much of learning you take away from them. But when I started with CNN International, which was in 2020, I realized it's fact-based journalism, and I'm not taking away from the Indian news channels here saying that it isn't fact-based journalism in India. Of course it is. But what really sets CNN apart, especially in crisis reportage and reporting, is the fact that there's a multi-layered system in terms of check and balances when you're out reporting. So you first are on the ground, you have your experiences to share. When you take that to another level, which is in scripting or putting out a longer format story, you actually have a very foolproof system at CNN. And I want to give you this example called the ROW. It's called the triad. So it's the ROW, it's the legal team, and the standards team that takes over your submissions. They go through it, and they fact check for you again to make sure that it's credible. And the word credible is so important to us today, isn't it? Like Sakal just mentioned, there's a WhatsApp factory out there of journalism. what sets CNN or any other channel apart from the WhatsApp factories or these journalists, out there on social media is the fact that you need to be credible, you need to be trustworthy. And that's what you need to do on the ground, Sakal. You need to make sure that you have those facts which cannot be debated, which cannot be challenged by anyone else. And that is what makes you a journalist. You say the pen is mightier than the sword. It's what you write with the pen, really, that makes the difference. You can write anything and be called a journalist, but what sets you apart is your conscience and what you put to paper, especially during a crisis situation. A quick example, during the second wave of COVID-19 here in Delhi, my boss has just said, Vedika, you don't have to be out on the field if you don't want to. I have a 6-year-old daughter at home. I have parents. I have a husband. I have a family like all of us out here. But how many of us can really put our hands up and say, we were not affected or impacted by the second wave of COVID, especially here in India? We all lost colleagues. And then I went to the Nigambodh crematorium, one of the biggest in Delhi. And it was a moment of grief as an Indian, as a mother, as a woman, and as a journalist for me, because what I saw out there were just tears of people breaking down, of a 4-year-old girl coming to cremate her parents, at a crematorium. And for me, as a journalist, as an Indian, it was a heartbreaking moment. But I had to put that behind me as a journalist. I had to be out there and only state facts. I wanted to cry in front of the camera. I stopped myself as a journalist. As a human being, it all impacts you so much. You take it home with you. And I was away from my daughter for 18 days. I decided to stay away in a hotel because I had parents with me at that time and my young daughter. So going out there, meeting people, telling their stories. And for CNN, this is just the India Bureau, but taking that story to someone in America and telling them why it should matter is what journalism is about. It's about bringing communities together. Dr. Jawad just pointed out about diversity. This is what journalists do. They make you understand a story, whichever corner of the country or the world you're in, to make sure that someone sitting right there in the West or someone down south understands the human suffering, the facts, and why people are dying and what can really stop it from happening. All of that is a part of crisis and telling the truth and fact in times of adversity.
Okay, so when very rightly put, Indra, when we also talk about crisis, two things, credibility and, like she pointed out, not really misinterpreting or that panic button. Now, let's a little bit move beyond pandemic and talk about, say, for example, the Russia-Ukraine. Now, how much is too much? Who decides when it comes to crisis reportage, especially broadcast journalism? Filters, death toll, visuals of devastation. I think all this is also part and parcel. One may like to say that, oh, let's stick to the facts. Yes, we stick to the facts. And by the way, since you talked about the multi-layer fact check, we in India also have Press Information Bureau, and during the pandemic time, we had a PIB fact check. It was a regular 24/7 column, and we would, just feature that in our regular bulletins, PIB fact check column. Anyway, coming back to the crisis, credibility, ensuring there is no more further panic. How much is too much when it comes to covering crisis, especially wars, mayhems, conflict, bloodshed? Many would say, the producer wants dramatic visuals. But then, what is drama? How do we define drama during crisis?
Thank you, Sakal. Once again, thank you to my fellow panelists. Last night, I was thinking about this, and this is exactly the topic that I was thinking of. What is too much? I was at a ABU event, I think 5 years ago, and we were in a panel discussing how culture plays so much of an important role in the different parts of the world that we come from. I come from a very small part of the world. We have a population of only 800,000, not even 1 million. I come from a country where people are not used to seeing bloodshed on the streets. But yet, I've got a colleague from the same part of the world where recently in the elections, in their general elections, they had people being slaughtered on the streets. Now, we might see it as, from the newsroom perspective, yes, it's a very yummy content, if I may put it that way, because I'm going to draw the eyes on the screen.
Sellable. It's
And-
sellable.
Yeah, and then
TRP.
I'm going to be getting the best, viewership tonight. But before we decide on that, we always have to remember that we are human beings first. We have families. She mentioned it. I have a child at home who's turning 5. Do I really want to expose him to everything negative that's happening in this world and give him a future to look forward to with nothing that is positive? Does he grow up in an environment taking on mainstream news and thinking, hold on, in 15 years or 20 years when I grow up and go to university, there'll be nothing good in this world because what is being put out by every media organization? Coming back to what you mentioned, now, even for small broadcasters like us, when the Russia-Ukraine war took off and it was like, oh, look, yay, we've got some good content that we can put on television because we've got different people in our country who love to watch all these things. But then when we put up videos, or if we decide to put up videos of dead bodies on the streets, you are also playing a part in sort of wrong education of your own people who would pick up ideas from such things and think, it's happening in big countries like Russia and Ukraine. Maybe we can do this. I've covered 2 political crises in our country where I've seen death. I've seen people being shot to death. I've seen in a mutiny at a military camp where soldiers had stones slashed on their faces, and those were all pictures available on social media because it got leaked. But as I wasn't in this role, but I was a journalist, automatically it came to mind, we can't show this on screen. We can't put this on newspapers. I was in a newspaper at that time, even though it might make a very nice front page. Because for me, coming back to that, is we are human beings first. Yes, journalism is our passion. We love what we do. Every single person sitting here loves what they do. And my colleagues who have covered wars and who have been in the thick of things more than myself or my colleagues at home. But the human feeling, the human factor is the most important thing before deciding to flood our TV screens or major bulletins at 6 and 7 in the evening showing only death or only things that might, as you said, would sell. For me, if you can't be a good human being and tied to it being a passionate journalist, you are failing the people. Yeah. And then you have just finally, and then you have bosses who are above you who would say, no, I want this because you need to put it on. I have another colleague of mine from my same broadcast. He knows what we go through on a daily basis.
Yes.
Because we decide as a newsroom that we don't want to run this, but then you have your superiors who might decide to say, no, do it. And then you have to counsel journalists, and then you have to explain to them. And this takes this whole cycle of things, which is repeated every second, third day. And that's why I'm saying, if we're a good human being to start off with, and understand the pain and understand the logistics behind people and having empathy, it will make us brilliant journalists, it will
Yes.
make us brilliant broadcasters, and it will also make our people have that belief in us that we are not only going to do things for our benefit.
I think the key word here is empathy, as you rightly pointed out, Indra, and empathy and sensitivity. Let's not go overboard when it comes to selling our stories. And I'm going to go back to ma'am here, Ms. Gupta, since you're representing the national vertical here, All India Radio, and the national media, I mean. Well, for one thing I can say very confidently, since I'm also associated with DD and it's been a long time, that the sort of reach that we enjoy, with that comes a lot of responsibility. They say with power comes responsibility, but I think we with national networks are very, very mindful of the fact what is not to be shown. We are talking in the context of crisis, ma'am. So would you like to share some thoughts?
I will
The sensitivity bit.
Yeah. See, I was just thinking, and good you have asked. Basically, in the disaster kind of a situation, the most important thing is actually developing a connect with the people who are affected. I am not really going back to the pandemic kind of a thing. So what we have just discussed, most of the time, this creates only the panic. It looks very like, so because we are part of the public broadcast system. But I can tell you, from the law and order kind of a thing, and even for the rescue kind of a thing, say in case of any flood kind of a situation, the moment the social media or say the TV media is showing that, okay, there is, this kind of a ground reality is there. The people who are in safe positions, who are to be evacuated, they start getting into a very different kind of a panic, because they feel, no, the rescue is just being said. I am just saying, like, how it affects the sensitivities of the people, as we all are human beings. So that is why in any kind of disaster kind of a situation, it is actually a responsibility. I can say this, maybe being in that position, that no one should get into anything where it may lead to more panic, the wrong kind of information, and then a action contrary to that. This is one thing what you just said. I am giving you another example. Many times what happens that, again say the flood or a cyclone. It's better to take an example of a cyclone. Many of our friends, they go to the old pictures, they show the cyclone in a very different kind of a frame, because it is neither the same location nor the same thing, intensity wise and otherwise. And basically they say, no, we were showing because there is no panic. But what happens actually, the people refuse to get evacuated. The TV has shown this, we have seen this, the authorities are very well aware what is the ground situation. So that is why I just thought, let me get into this discussion, because again and again I will come back to one thing. The factual, the ground reality, that too, the way it is really helping us. See, all of us are trying to do some good job. It is not only giving news, because again I am coming back in the times of disaster and those kind of situations. So here, I think we really need to be very clear that the ethics, sensitivity of the persons, and as I said even in the earlier this thing, anything and everything, media is a two-way communication. And because of, as in India we very interestingly say the WhatsApp university, the feedback has also become very important for us. But how to use that, that's up to us as the media fraternity. There may be 200 kind of things doing rounds.
Right.
So that is why I am just saying that the human factor, the sensitivity has to be that situation specific. There cannot be an a frame of guidelines, or good or bad, right or wrong, yes or no. And I think all of us have to really sensitize all the people when there are directions regarding no. Like in India also we have the TRPs and all such issues, all of us know. But the sensitivity, because it is affecting the human lives. It is affecting actually everything around us.
Right, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Before I move ahead with my further deliberations and the panelist interventions, a quick request to our distinguished audience here. We have this hall full of top news representatives from leading national and international organizations. So in case you want to make a point, not necessarily a question to any of our panelists, anything that you would want to share with us as a journalist, your experience, the panel is open for you. All you have to do is to just raise your hand, and the mic, we will just hand over the mic, come to you rather, and you can make your point. And now, coming to you, since we talked about cyclones and typhoons, and one of your country has been, and mostly at the receiving end of all this. So a quick one on that bit, how do you really grapple that? Because on daily basis, on regular basis, climatic crises and covering that and ensuring at the same time that, there is no panic. Yeah. So the do's and don'ts quickly, and then we move ahead to the other aspects of the crisis.
Well, it's been our policy to adhere to our code of ethics. And that is another important thing to remind our public, that we, journalists, are accountable to them, to our profession, and to ourselves. And so it is incumbent upon us, and our reporters are aware of this whenever they are sent or deployed to crisis areas or calamities. Their job is to provide information that would help communities, people, so they avoid, the destructive paths of either typhoons or, volcanic eruptions and such, which my country has had a fair share of, and more typhoons are said to be entering our area of responsibility until the end of the year. And so it is important for us to take note of what our audience needs to know, what communities need to know, what information would help them survive calamities, and at the same time follow government evacuation orders. We have something in common, Ms. Gupta, because there are thousands of residents perhaps in our remote areas that also refuse to evacuate. But we hope that that is slowly changing because of media's help as well. And I would also like to note that in terms of building or rebuilding trust with our audiences, we also need to evolve. We can no longer look at our public as a mere audience. We need to connect with them on a human level. We need to engage with them, not just use them for our stories. That was something that I learned because through the years, we go to communities, we talk to people, we show their plight, their suffering, and then what? Nothing. After a story's aired, nothing. So we made it a practice to come back and revisit certain areas and look at how the people we covered before at the height of calamities have coped. And to me, that is important for us to know, that we need to be aware that we must make our public also our partners, so that they understand, and they understand what we do, and in the process they become smarter consumers of news. Yes.
All right. Vedika, now that also brings to the question, and it's not really a question, a point. And I think all of us here who have been reporters also, this is something very close to our hearts. How much is too much, but not that. The whole TRP war. And what all can I do, especially when it comes to the crisis coverage? I need a mega exclusive. To what extent I can go and cross that line to get a mega exclusive? How much is too much when it comes to making my story sellable and TRP oriented? But then remember, I'm covering war, I'm covering crisis, I'm covering bloodshed. I'll just quote a small example. I covered Pulwama terror attack, and that's when I was I had a tight rope to walk. I'm not going to reveal the entire story here. So I had this situation on ground which could have been, the great exclusive to my career. But then this whole thing that, is it really worth it? It's the crisis of phenomenal proportion for us. The nation was mourning. And as a reporter, I was on a tightrope walk. How much is too much?
I think the answer is twofold here, Sakal. One is to what length would you go as an individual, and to what length you're ready to go in terms of working with your company, with the channel you're with. But who's going to be impacted at the end of it is the bigger question. Yes. And that should actually be the only answer to your question here. As an individual, am I ready to jump on an exclusive to be given a pat on my back by my boss? No. Is my company, CNN International, going to compromise for me to go get that? Certainly no. I'm not here to be pompous about my channel, but I know it's a leading channel today because it's the most trusted channel in the world. More people go to CNN worldwide, I mean, in terms of multi-platform coverage, because they know the news out there will be the truth. Be it the wars, be it the crisis you face, like I said, you have to know who is going to be impacted in the end of it. You'll be on air covering it, you'll get those pats on your back. But what about the people who are being impacted, right? So going back to the second wave again, we had a lot of stories to cover. There were people, who were also, Sakal, very emotional at that point. They'd lost their mothers, their fathers, their families. How do you go up to them as well and ask them, are you suffering? So obvious that they are, isn't it?
What do you ask them?
What do you ask them? I've written about this as well. I remember there was this 29-year-old boy. He lost his mother. I met him at the crematorium. There was no one with him except for a cousin because his father was in hospital. He was discharged that morning. His twin was still in hospital fighting COVID. At that moment, I could go on air and say, look at this man, he's just lost his mother, his brother is in hospital, his father's just been discharged, he's wailing at home. I decided to be a human being first. I kept my mic and camera inside the bag. I went and sat next to him for the next 15 minutes, and I just shared his grief. I've never used his name, though I did have the permission till I wrote that piece, and it took me a lot of time to write that piece. It was very cathartic for me as well, because like I said, we all went through that crisis. I could have actually stood there at the crematorium, and at that time, being at a crematorium, very few journalists were doing that. We had our PPE kits, obviously safety gear, everything. Without that, we weren't allowed to enter the crematorium. You had the safety group team checking on you every 10 minutes. Are you okay? Do you have your mask? Do you need something? But that moment was a moment I had to decide, do I sit next to a boy who's lost his mother, he doesn't know if his family is going to survive, or should I go on air with my live view and talk about his situation and sensationalize this? And I decided not to. We didn't use any of his pictures. We didn't get him on camera, because that was a moment you had to be with a person who was facing an immense loss. And you have to deal with that every day, Sakal. You have to deal with your conscience every day. So you can have pressure from whoever it may be, but at the end of the day, you have to go to bed doing the right thing as a journalist.
And I think with us, yes, thank you so much. I would, because we are, I think, in the last lap of this round of panel discussion, Shubhendu, we do have 10, 15 minutes, so in case any one of you wants to make a point or something, yes, sir, I'm going to come to you. But before that, I would like to tell our audience here that since you talked about the whole sensationalism thing, and Ms. Gupta here would agree that we, with the national broadcaster, this is an unsaid ground rule. Sensationalism, absolute no. I mean, coming back to that point that what is it for at the end of the day? Where is this news going and what's going to be the larger impact? We have a gentleman here, I think from Nepal.
Yeah.
Yes,
Namaste.
please.
Namaste.
Introduce yourself and please ask your
my
question.
name is Rajendra from Nepal Television, state broadcaster. Okay, thank you, Sakal. And I would like to know about the experience of Doordarshan. Just Vasudha mentioned that some channels or some social media make viral old photos, old images, old footage. But the ground reality is different, especially in the cases of fires, cyclone, floods. We, as a state media, we have to check fact, as Vedika told. That is the base of the trust. However, the society goes beyond that trust. Then, similar social network or social media does the same. In this context, as a state media or public broadcaster, public service media, what would be the role? Do or should we to counter the social media or such type of old footage, or to be remain silent? What is the experience of Doordarshan especially?
Right. In the Indian context, whenever any such thing comes to our notice, actually, I am wrong in saying this. We actually monitor also. Because basically, it's the public, it's our country, it's our people, and we are responsible that if they are getting something which is not correct, they should not get affected. The same thing, sensitivity, which I just said few minutes back. So what happens, as we said, through our fact check mechanism, we do that. And that is again done through a complete research kind of a thing. And as Priya also said in her presentation and otherwise also, if we have to look at what is the gravity, what is the volume of this kind of misinformation, the photograph or the footage, or like if a TV screen is being like, you know, the snapshot is doing rounds on the social media in any platform. And depending upon that, once it's found out, along with the details, what is the correct thing. It's an old picture from that time frame. That is done. And once the fact check is done, then all the media platforms are used to tell people that this was not correct. So kindly do not get into these kind of things.
Right, ma'am.
I will add one more thing with your
Sure.
permission, that it is not only the old photos or the old footage to create this kind of a thing. Even lot of good government policies, there are morphed kind of images and they will put something else, that this is being done, government is giving this, or this kind of a thing has been banned. Absolutely wrong information, because it is again affecting millions and billions in our country. So those kind of things also, as I just said, once noticed, the fact check is done along with all the credentials, that exactly what is wrong in that, and people are advised, requested not to get into those traps. Because as very nicely Reyes said, the social media again is a two-way, and it's a very dangerous kind of a thing if used in the wrong perspective. And especially for the news.
Right.
This is really getting, I should use the word wild in all respects. as on
We
date.
should know, and I think
Yeah.
as an editorial policy, where to draw a line. I've been told the last 5 minutes, very quickly, sir, very quickly, we've just left the last 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
have to take the closing remarks. Please introduce
Yeah, this is
yourself.
Guru Babu, Director News, Doordarshan, Chennai. My question to the panelist, you spoke about being human and taking the responsibility upon yourself to do the right thing of reporting right. Well, the context which we had, the challenge which we had was the expectation from the government to showcase what good they have been doing to the people when there was a huge devastation and death all around. And my question to Vedika Sud, you spoke about being a human and not reporting death and devastation which was being watched by you. Well, we know that the social media was one platform where the news was being shared, where even your management would have seen that. Did you come across a situation where your television channel called you back to say, where is the story? And how did you manage that? Well, when selling this, the way we managed in our television station was to talk about the Good Samaritans. We have a good network of part-time correspondents across the districts. When the government was showcasing the good which they did to the people, what we showcased was the Good Samaritans who braved the situation, risked their lives, and do their part to go and help the people who were in need. Like an auto driver who lost his wife and a child, but who chose to pick up a cylinder, put it in his auto, and give that as a help to those who were in need there, breathing. You know, these were the stories which we took. And the PTCs, the part-time correspondents on the field, were the ones to check the credibility of it, like you talked about the fact-finding. How did you manage when your television channel
Right.
came back to you asking about why you'd missed this?
Vedika, quickly.
I didn't get your name.
I'm Guru Babu, Director News,
Thank you for
Doordarshan
your
Kendra,
question.
Chennai.
I'm very glad you asked me that question. So, yes, we did talk about the Good Samaritans. In fact, if the news was bleak, it's also the responsibility of us as a news channel, as a news team, as a journalist, to go out there and even provide some uplifting news in the time of crisis. We did actually follow a Good Samaritan who was saving many lives in New Delhi. You all would have heard of him. His name is B. Srinivas. And though he is politically affiliated with one of the mainstream parties, he was providing oxygen cylinders to many people, not only in Delhi, but across the northern belt of India. We tracked him all day. We started at a crematorium where he, along with his team, actually voluntarily helped this young girl. She's a journalist. She lost her father. Her mother was ailing. Her brother was in Australia. They actually cremated the father's body for her. And she herself was COVID positive. She was standing right there in the electric crematorium area of this crematorium, and they actually cremated the body for her. After that, we followed him to another place very far off in Delhi, one of the corners of Delhi, where a 4-year-old boy needed an oxygen cylinder. And through this journey, we were with him for about 10 to 12 hours through the day. He was receiving a call every minute. And I'm not trying to sensationalize this. I was sitting in the same car as him, and we were recording all of it. Everyone was asking for an oxygen cylinder, and this man, wherever he could get it from, he tried his level best. He was not the only one. There were these Good Samaritans across India who were helping. There's a chef called Mr. Vikas Khanna, if you know him. There's this very well-known chef who now lives in New York. He was helping people in India sitting in New York. He was providing millions of meals to people on a daily basis for months while sitting there. It was his contribution to his country while they were being impacted by the first wave of COVID. But to answer the second part to your question, no, I never got that call from my bosses saying, where's that story? I never got that call.
There were many individuals, many organizations, and unsung heroes. And yes, some of them, the stories were reflected in Indian media and, of course, on social media as well. I'm going to quickly take final remarks.
Sorry, Sakal. I just wanted to add something to the
Yes.
question that was given. I totally agree with you. You know, when good is done, you want to show it. It borders on the line of solutions journalism as well.
Yeah,
where,
that's right.
Where it's great to show some person who is doing all the good and giving, solutions to the crisis we're facing, but you can do that perfectly without showing bad footage, if I may put it that way.
Sharing the best practice.
Yes. I mean, the solutions journalism is something that if we all started, and I know a lot of organizations are incorporating it, we will be actually playing a major role in helping, and that's what you've just pointed out.
That Indra comes to the last final question or a point of change makers. I'm going to give you 15 seconds each, or maybe 25 seconds each, to wrap up this lap of the discussion, starting with Indra. Crisis media reportage and media organization / journalists as change makers.
15 seconds.
Okay, 25.
What Vedika just said, and I think the round of applause did tell us what it means. I will maintain the fact that we are change makers, yes. We are the ones that play a major role. We sacrifice our families during times of crisis. We are not at home. Many people don't think too much of us, in our individual countries. No matter how good work you'll do, all the sacrifices you do. For me, let's continue doing what we've been doing, and let's help the people that matter the most, and that's the public at large, particularly in the smallest of places, like in India, of course, which is such a big country, and they've got small regions. In our country, where people are in the rural areas and don't have access to television and only have the radio to listen to, let's be the voice for those people to provide them with solutions, and of course, work together as a media family all around the world that we can come up and help our people. Thank you.
Regina, we haven't heard you. You will get 45 seconds.
I would just like to share what my newsroom went through in the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
So we lost our license, as some of you know, our broadcast license. But when this super typhoon visited our country 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, we deployed our resources to the typhoon areas. And we served a need of the public. We saw that we were still needed in spite of all the hate, the trolling, and the bashing that we suffered in the last couple of years. So that made us believe even more in our mission. It's true that we have to keep evolving. We have to be aware of this concept, this idea of news avoidance, which is related to your question of when is too much, how much is too much in terms of crisis coverage. But when it really counts, our audiences really need to be informed about crisis and how they can avoid or prevent or survive it. So, to me, that validated our belief in our profession, that experience, and we did get a lot of, by the way, not to toot our horn, but a lot of positive feedback, because at a crucial time that night, we were the only ones reporting on the impending calamity. And people were made aware of that, and people appreciated that. And so I think my final word is just continue doing what we do. Let's be better at our jobs. Let's evolve, because we need to change as well. We need to be in step with the times. And I think whatever happens, our profession would be necessary, would be essential to a democracy.
Absolutely.
And so we need to continue truth-telling, and we need to stand by the values that enable it. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Vedika, quickly.
So I think once someone told me very recently that there is a difference between those who are educated and those who are aware. I think as journalists, our aim should be to make people aware, collectively aware, so that they know how to counter a situation, a crisis. You will have your WhatsApp groups, you will have those messages being forwarded, but the day you look at that message, you fact check and send it back to that one person in your family. There's always a history sheeter, I say, with these WhatsApp groups. There's that one person who will share a message which will not be factually correct. But the day you turn around and send the fact back to that person is the day I'll feel that, yes, we've made someone aware. And that essentially is the job of us as journalists and as change makers in a country like India or anywhere else.
Journalists as change makers. Final word, ma'am,
Not really the final word.
for this panel.
I think on this matter, we are change maker, at least I feel so, no doubt. But how we can go ahead is, if we are more inclusive, as I just said, as we are more sensitive. When I said sensitive, I mean a real two-way communicators, in the sense we should reach to the people, because we are media, in the times of their need, in whatever way, because it's all situation specific, and we should also become their voice, in the sense the feedback mechanism, because I believe the society as a whole is always an all-inclusive. Unnecessarily lot of things happen, and in the media, what happens, one side is being shown at one point of time, the other side at the other point of time. So to be a real effective change maker, we really need to have an all-inclusive approach and way of working. That's my message.
Thank you so much. So, well, the bottom line here, at least as far as this panel is concerned, that they say, as the cliche goes, and I'm sure all of you know, with power comes responsibility. I think with crisis, with that comes a lot of credibility, and with that credibility for all of us as journalists comes a huge amount of responsibility. On that note, I'm going to quickly thank Ms. Vasudha Gupta, DG, NSD News and All India Radio, also thanking Vedika Sud, CNN Delhi correspondent. Many thanks, Indra Singh, ABU News Group Chair and Managing Manager of News and Sports FPC, all the way from Fiji. Thank you so much. And my dear Regina Reyes, Senior Vice President and Head of Integrated News and Current Affairs at ABS-CBN in the Philippines. Thank you very, very much, all of you.